I was sitting in the makeshift office inside the small tent, the heat of Afghanistan pressing down on me even though the sun had just begun to set. My mind was consumed with the ever-growing pile of paperwork, the hum of the generators outside, the quiet conversations of my fellow soldiers. It all felt distant. Just another day, another long stretch of isolation. Then my phone vibrated on the desk. I glanced down, recognizing the number, Ava, my daughter. She didn't call often, and certainly not at this hour. My heart sank a little. It was late at home in San Antonio, but she knew I was only a phone call away. As a father, I always kept my promises, especially when it came to being there for her. I pressed the answer button and held the phone to my ear. Her voice, shaky and barely audible, sent a cold rush through me. "Dad, I need to talk to you. It's about Mom." I froze. My throat tightened. Ava never sounded like this. The words hung in the air between us, pregnant with a weight I couldn't place. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "What's going on, sweetheart?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it betrayed me. "I don't know how to say this, but I'm really scared. I think something's going on with Mom. She's with someone else, Dad." A chill ran through my spine. My chest tightened as if something was crushing it. I hadn't prepared myself for this. Not here, not now, not in the middle of this God-forsaken desert. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" "I've seen her, Dad. I've seen the way she's been acting. She's gone out more often, and she's been texting a lot, even late at night. Sometimes she doesn't come home until after I go to bed." Ava's voice cracked. "I know something's not right. She's with someone else, I'm sure of it." A flood of emotions hit me all at once, shock, disbelief, and something darker I couldn't quite name. Could it be true? Could Rachel, my wife of 18 years, the woman I had shared everything with, really be cheating on me? I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell her it was all in her head, that everything was fine. But deep down, something gnawed at me. A part of me had always trusted Rachel completely, but the words that Ava spoke cut through that trust like a knife. It wasn't just a suspicion. Ava was afraid. "Sweetheart, calm down," I said, my voice softer now, but still tight with emotion. "Are you sure? What have you seen exactly?" She sniffled, clearly on the verge of tears. I saw her with a man, Dad. I don't know who he is, but I saw them kiss. I was in my room and I heard them outside. She was smiling like I've never seen her smile. And then she kissed him. It wasn't just a quick kiss, Dad. It was more. A lump formed in my throat. I could barely breathe, my mind racing with images of Rachel in another man's arms. I'd always believed in our marriage. Even during the long deployments, the distance, the uncertainty, I never questioned her faithfulness. Now it felt like the ground was being ripped out from under me. "Dad, please. I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." Ava's voice was now filled with desperation. "I need you to come home, please. I need you to figure this out. I don't know what to do." Her words hit me like a slap across the face. Come home? I couldn't just drop everything and go back. I had responsibilities here, a job to do. But how could I sit here thousands of miles away knowing my family was falling apart? Ava needed me. Rachel. She needed me. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to clear the fog in my mind. "I'm coming, Ava. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise you. I'll be there as soon as I can." "Don't tell Mom I called," she whispered quickly, her voice trembling. "Please, Dad, just don't make it worse. I don't want her to know I told you." I could hear the fear in her words. The last thing she wanted was to make things more difficult, but the weight of her own discovery had already taken its toll. The silence between us felt heavy. "I won't tell her, I swear," I said, my voice barely a whisper now. "Just stay strong. I'll be home soon." As we ended the call, my heart was in pieces. I had to get home, but there was something deeper gnawing at me now, a sense of impending doom. I didn't know what awaited me when I returned, but I couldn't ignore Ava's plea. Something was terribly wrong, and I was about to face a truth I wasn't ready for. I'd barely slept during the 26-hour journey home. The entire time, I kept replaying Ava's words in my head. The kiss, the way Rachel had looked at another man. The thought twisted inside me like a knife, dull and relentless. I hadn't expected to hear those words, not in a million years. It was supposed to be a temporary separation, a deployment that we would both get through like we always had. But this was different. The moment I landed, I rented a car and drove straight to San Antonio. Every mile seemed to stretch further from the man I had been before. I wasn't just returning home as a soldier anymore. I was coming back to face a broken version of my life, a life I thought I understood. As I neared the house, the familiar sight of the neighborhood felt surreal. The lights on, the faint hum of air conditioners cooling homes in the Texas heat. Everything was just as I had left it. Except I knew now that nothing was the same. I parked the car half a block from the house. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and I felt like a ghost, walking in my own life. For a moment, I considered turning around. The thought of confronting Rachel, of facing the woman I had built a life with, who had once been my everything, was too much. My chest tightened. What would I say? How could I even ask the questions I needed to ask? I pulled my jacket tighter around me and swallowed the lump in my throat. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about Ava, about doing what was right for her, even if I had no idea what that was. I reached for my phone and dialed Ava's number. She answered after the third ring. Her voice was soft, the way it always was when she was nervous. "Dad?" I forced a smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm outside." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I knew she was scared, but there was no turning back now. "I can see her," Ava whispered. She's getting ready to go out again." I glanced at the house. Through the windows, I could see Rachel moving around. She wasn't aware that I was there. That gave me a brief moment to think, maybe even to reconsider how I wanted to handle this. But I knew deep down that I couldn't let this go. I couldn't leave things unanswered. "I'm going to watch, Ava," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "You don't need to worry. I'll figure this out. Just stay inside, okay?" "Be careful, Dad. Don't do anything crazy." Her voice cracked, and I could feel her fear, even from miles away. "I just don't want things to get worse," I promised her, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. What did she know about the mess I was about to walk into? I ended the call and watched Rachel for a while. She moved with an unfamiliar energy, different from the woman I remembered. There was a lightness in her step. She seemed almost excited. That thought chilled me. For all these years, Rachel had been my rock, the woman who would wait for me, who would keep things steady back home. And now, here she was, betraying everything we had built. I had to know. I couldn't stand to be in the dark anymore. At 7 p.m., the black Mercedes rolled into the driveway. A man I didn't recognize got out, tall, well-dressed, and confident. He made his way to the front door, but instead of knocking, he paused to talk on his cell phone. I could see him from where I stood, and I felt a coldness settle over me. This was real. This was happening. A moment later, Rachel stepped out onto the porch. She locked the door behind her, and without a second glance at the house, she walked briskly toward the man. She smiled, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen in months, maybe even years. She leaned in, and they kissed. Not a quick peck, but a deep kiss, one that spoke of familiarity, of something more. My heart shattered. It felt like the world was closing in on me. How could this be happening? How could the woman I trusted most be capable of something like this? I fumbled for my phone, the screen shaking in my hands as I quickly snapped a photo. I couldn't afford to act on impulse now, even though every inch of me screamed to charge forward to confront her right there. I had to keep it together. They broke the kiss, and the man helped her into the car. They drove off, leaving me standing in the darkness, frozen. I couldn't move. The betrayal had hit me harder than I had expected. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the complete disregard for everything I thought we had. I leaned against the car, trying to steady myself. A cold wind had picked up, cutting through my jacket. But the chill I felt was deeper than the weather. It was the feeling of a man who had lost something precious, something irreplaceable. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my head spinning. I wanted to tear into the man, to storm into the hotel where they were headed. I wanted to lash out, to scream at Rachel, to make her understand the damage she had done. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to be smart. I had to be methodical. For Ava, for me. I followed them in my car, maintaining a careful distance. The black Mercedes glided through the streets of San Antonio, its sleek design a stark contrast to the familiar neighborhood where Rachel and I had built our life together. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. The calmness I had tried to maintain earlier was beginning to unravel. Every inch of road felt like it led deeper into a nightmare I wasn't prepared for. They turned down a street I didn't recognize, but I knew the destination. The Resin Hotel, the place where Rachel and I had celebrated anniversaries, where we'd stayed for romantic weekends when things were simpler. Now, the thought of that place filled me with a bitter rage. I had to steady myself. I couldn't just rush in there. I needed to have proof. Real proof. I parked in the lot across the street, the shadows of the hotel stretching long into the evening. My heart raced, and I felt the sting of humiliation burn deep within my chest. I was a man who had trusted his wife, who had stood by her through every hardship. But this was betrayal at its purest form. I pulled out my phone, the screen illuminating my face. I looked at the photo I had taken earlier. The kiss, the proof that my entire world was shattering before me. Rachel, the woman I loved, the mother of my child, was in another man's arms. The image burned into my mind, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I couldn't just rely on a photo. I needed to see them together. I needed to hear them. I left the car and moved stealthily, keeping a low profile as I approached the entrance. The lobby was busy, but my military training kicked in and I moved with purpose, my camo hat and sunglasses helping me blend into the crowd. No one seemed to notice me, but my mind was sharp, scanning the area, every part of me alert to the possibility of running into someone I knew. I walked past the front desk, acknowledging the staff with a brief nod. As I reached the elevator bank, I noticed a sign for a charity ball on the 3rd floor. The event seemed to be in full swing, and the sound of orchestra music filtered down to the lobby. It wasn't hard to figure out where they were. Rachel and her date were there. I didn't need to know where the ballroom was. I just had to follow the music. I took the stairs. I couldn't risk using the elevator and attracting attention. The effort gave me time to think, but the thoughts were too much to handle. How could Rachel do this to me? How could she betray everything we had built? All the trust, the years of memories, for a man like him. On the 3rd floor, I found the ballroom. The laughter and chatter filled the air as I walked past the entrance. My eyes scanned the room, and there they were, Rachel and Victor Daniels. They were wrapped up in each other, moving gracefully across the dance floor. She was in his arms, her head resting on his chest, eyes closed in bliss. The image of her, my Rachel, my wife, was forever altered in my mind. My stomach churned. I had seen enough. I took several photos, capturing every moment. Rachel's hand was on Victor's neck, and his hand rested possessively on her lower back. They were lost in each other, oblivious to everything around them. The deep kiss they shared, the affection they openly displayed. It made me sick. The woman I had trusted, who had once promised to love me, was now kissing another man like they had no care in the world. I wanted to confront them right then and there. I wanted to storm onto the floor and demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't help. I needed to stay composed. I needed to keep my head straight, despite the rage that boiled inside me. I waited, watching them with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. They danced another song, and then, arm in arm, they made their way to their table, sitting close together. I could see it now. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was something deeper, something long-term. I made my way back out to the hallway, finding a seat by the elevator. I couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. I had been right all along, and yet I still felt powerless. The truth was too much to bear. My world was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I sat there, my eyes fixed on the ballroom doors, as time passed slowly. Another 2 hours. It felt like an eternity. Finally, they made their exit. Victor and Rachel stood outside the ballroom, talking in low tones. They shared a smile, a private moment that only the two of them could understand. It was sickening. They turned towards the elevator, but instead of pressing the down button, they selected the one that would take them up. I stayed hidden in plain sight, not far from them, but they didn't notice me. I could barely breathe as I watched them enter the elevator holding hands, their fingers intertwined. I followed at a distance. I couldn't lose them now. I was too close. The elevator stopped on the 11th floor. I waited a few moments, making sure they hadn't noticed me. Then I found the stairs and waited by the door, keeping it ajar so I could hear anything that happened in the room. It was a long wait. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like a year. My heart raced, my hands cold and clammy. I didn't know how much longer I could endure this, watching them together, knowing what was happening in that room. Finally, I heard the sound of movement, a door opening. I held my breath, my phone already in hand, ready to capture the moment when they left. I had to see this through. I had to make sure I had everything I needed. Proof, the truth, so I could face Rachel, so I could face myself. I stood in the hallway, watching the elevator doors close behind Rachel and Victor. My legs felt like lead, my mind a blur. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up, but there was no turning back now. I had seen enough, but I needed more. More proof, more confirmation, something undeniable that I could hold on to when the moment came to confront her. I couldn't stay in the hallway forever. I made my way toward the stairwell, my eyes constantly darting around to make sure no one saw me. I couldn't afford to be recognized, not now. The thought of someone in this hotel knowing what I was doing made my stomach turn. But I didn't care. I had to know. I stepped into the stairwell, walking quietly to the door that led to the hotel's upper floors. The 11th floor. That's where they had gone. The thought made my blood boil, but I kept moving forward one step at a time, the weight of the situation pressing on me like a vice. I had to be careful. I couldn't just barge in there. I reached the 11th floor and paused for a moment, steadying my breath. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone, checking the photos I had taken earlier. The kiss, the way Rachel had looked at Victor, it was undeniable. But I needed more. I needed to hear them, to see them in the kind of moment that couldn't be explained away. A stolen kiss was one thing, but this was a betrayal of everything. I walked quietly down the hall, stopping at the door to room 1114. I didn't dare get too close. I knew they could still be inside, and if they heard me, I would lose my chance. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear anything, voices, movement, anything that would confirm my worst fears. The sound of muffled laughter echoed from the other side of the door. My heart skipped a beat. It was them, Rachel and Victor. I couldn't make out their words, but the sound of their laughter, their ease with one another, it hit me harder than I could have imagined. How long had this been going on? What had they shared behind closed doors while I was half a world away, serving my country? Every laugh, every sound felt like a knife twisting deeper inside me. I backed away from the door, fighting the urge to burst in, to confront them right then and there. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to be smart. I needed to gather everything I could, make sure I wasn't going into this blindly. I stepped back down the hallway, trying to stay calm, but inside I was seething. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete destruction of everything I had trusted. Rachel had let someone else into our home, into our life, into our bed. How could she? How could she betray me like this? I sat down on a bench near the elevators, feeling a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep this up. I wanted to storm into that room, demand answers from her, from Victor. But I couldn't, not yet. As the minutes dragged on, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just let this pass. I couldn't let Rachel and Victor get away with it. I had to expose them. I had to make them face what they were doing to me, to our family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw them. Rachel and Victor were walking down the hallway, their bodies close together. They didn't even notice me. They were so wrapped up in each other, so lost in their own world, that they didn't see the man who had spent years trusting them both. I took out my phone, snapping a few pictures. The evidence was undeniable. There they were, walking side by side, looking like any other couple, except for one glaring difference. Rachel was married to me. They reached the elevator, and I moved quickly, not wanting to be seen, but close enough to get a shot of them entering together. The door closed behind them, and I was left standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked back to the stairwell, trying to keep my emotions in check. I had what I needed now. I had more than enough to confront Rachel, more than enough to expose her. But as I stood there looking out at the hotel lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same. The woman I loved, the woman I had spent my life with, had shattered everything we had, and now I had to deal with the aftermath. I stood there, staring at the hotel lobby, trying to hold myself together. There was no going back now. I had to face her. I had to face the truth. But deep down I already knew. It was over. The hotel room felt like a furnace, the air thick with heat and tension as I sat alone in the dark. I couldn't stop replaying the images in my mind. The kiss, the way they held each other, the warmth of Rachel's smile when she looked at Victor. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a betrayal so deep it threatened to swallow me whole. My phone buzzed beside me, a message from Ava. I couldn't face her yet, not with this wreckage in my chest. I had to focus. I had to think clearly. My mind raced, but one thought kept coming back to me. How could she do this? How could she betray me in this way? How could she betray us? But more than the hurt, something darker began to creep in, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. Pure, unadulterated anger. It wasn't enough to just know the truth. It wasn't enough to sit here and feel sorry for myself. No. I needed to make her feel what I felt. I needed her to understand the pain she'd caused, the years she had just torn apart with a smile and a kiss. I needed revenge. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, trying to collect my thoughts. I had never been a man of vengeance. It was foreign to me, a feeling I'd only read about in stories, not something that resided in the man I had been. But now, sitting here, I could feel it. The thirst for retribution, the desire to make her pay. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just Victor. It was the lies, the secrets, the quiet moments when I had trusted her to keep our family intact. And instead, she had let it all slip away for what? A fleeting moment of excitement with a man who thought more of his own power than the people he stepped on to get it? I couldn't turn back now. This was my reality. This was the truth, and I had to deal with it. But how? How could I make Rachel feel the weight of her actions? I thought about our years together, the vacations, the quiet evenings, the promises we had made to one another, and I thought about how easily she had discarded them, how easily she had cast aside our entire marriage. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this, not with her head held high, not when I had given so much of myself to her. I stood up, pacing the room. My thoughts became clearer, sharper. The pieces fell into place. First, I needed to expose her, not just to me, not just to Ava, but to the world, to everyone who had ever trusted her, who had admired her, to the people in our community who had no idea what lay behind the curtain of our perfect life. I would make sure everyone knew. I would make sure they saw her for who she really was. Second, I needed to destroy Victor. This man, this coward hiding behind his position, thinking he could have whatever he wanted without consequences. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. His reputation, his career, everything he held dear, it was all going to be torn apart. He needed to feel the sting of what it meant to be publicly exposed. He needed to know what it was like to lose everything in the blink of an eye, just like I had. I pulled out my phone again, staring at the images I had captured. The kiss, the way Rachel had clung to Victor. The photos were damning, and they were only the beginning. I would take it further. I needed more than just images. I needed to destroy them completely. I ran my fingers over the screen, thinking. I could contact the press, show them the photos, get everything out in the open. It was the only way to make sure Rachel paid, to make sure Victor lost everything. And once it was all out there would be no turning back. Everyone would know. I couldn't stop the surge of satisfaction that ran through me at the thought. They both deserved it. They deserved to feel the pain they had caused me, to lose everything they had just as I was losing everything. But even as the anger burned inside me, a small voice in the back of my mind asked, "What will this accomplish? What will it leave you with?" The answer was simple. Nothing. But that didn't matter. This wasn't about healing. This was about justice. And justice meant making them suffer, making them understand what it was like to be betrayed, to have your world shattered without warning. I turned away from the window, my face cold. The anger was still there, but now it had a purpose. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone stand in my way. I had been a soldier for years. I understood strategy. I knew how to execute a plan with precision, and this was my mission now, my war. Rachel and Victor were the enemy, and I would not rest until I had won. I grabbed my jacket, heading out of the room. I wasn't sure what the next step would be, but I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would stop me from getting the revenge I so desperately craved. I couldn't sleep. Not with everything swirling in my head with the plan taking shape. It had been 2 days since I had confronted the brutal reality of Rachel's betrayal, and my mind had not stopped running since. The images, the conversations, the hidden looks they shared, they were all burned into my memory, like a constant, cruel reminder of everything I had lost. Sitting in the dimly lit room, I finally took a breath and reached for my phone. I scrolled through the photos I had taken, each one sharper than the last. I could feel the rage surging again, but this time it wasn't just blind anger. It was focus. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The truth had to come out, and I would be the one to make sure it did. I thought about Ava, sitting at home, probably confused and hurt. She had been the one to warn me to open my eyes, and now I had to protect her, shield her from the storm that was coming. I would make sure she was safe no matter what it took. The first thing I needed was to gather more information. It wasn't enough to have photos. I needed to ensure that this affair was more than a fleeting mistake. I needed to find out how deep it went. I needed to know how long it had been going on. If I was going to expose them, I had to make sure there was no way they could wriggle out of the truth. I pulled up the phone number for the local paper. I had a contact there, someone who owed me a favor. I had never thought I'd need his help for something like this, but here I was. The idea of going public with everything made my stomach twist, but I couldn't deny that it was the only way to make Rachel and Victor truly feel the weight of their actions. I pressed the call button, my heartbeat pounding in my chest. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Robert," he said, his voice low but familiar. "What's going on?" "Listen, I need your help with something. It's personal," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "I need to expose something big, and I need it to go public." "Big?" He hesitated. "What are we talking about here?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "An affair, my wife, and the mayor." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're serious," he finally said, his voice shifting from curiosity to concern. "You know the risks, right? You're asking me to take on something pretty dangerous." "I don't care about the risks," I snapped, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I need you to help me expose them. I've got photos, I've got everything, but I need the truth out there. To the public, I need people to know who they really are." Another pause. Okay, I'll help, but you need to understand something. This is going to blow up. You're going to be in the middle of it." "You sure about this?" "I'm sure," I said, the words colder than I meant them to be. I wasn't sure about anything anymore, except that I couldn't sit idly by pretending everything was fine. It wasn't fine, and Rachel's actions had proven that. I need to make them pay for this. I can't just let it slide. "I'll get the ball rolling. I'll be in touch," he said before hanging up. I sat back in the chair, feeling the weight of what I had just set into motion. The papers would get the story. They'd run it. Rachel's face, Victor's face, would be plastered on every page. Everyone would know. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to make sure Rachel understood the full scope of what I was doing. She couldn't just walk away from this. The guilt would eat her up. At least, that's what I told myself. Maybe it would. Maybe it wouldn't. But the truth would be out there. It had to be. I needed to take the next step. The plan couldn't stop with the press. I had to act in a way that would hurt them both, in a way they would never forget. I had to do more than just ruin their reputations. I had to make sure they felt the consequences of their actions deeply. I thought about the charity event. about the way they had danced together, how they had looked so comfortable with one another, so normal, so perfect, while I was thousands of miles away, trusting her. I thought about the way he had treated her like the center of his world, as though I didn't even exist. That's when the idea hit me. I would leak the story to the public. I would flood the town with the truth. But I wouldn't just stop there. I would make sure Victor's position as mayor became untenable. He needed to feel the full weight of his power being stripped away. I couldn't just expose him as a cheater. I needed to take everything from him, every last shred of his career. As for Rachel, I would make sure she faced the fallout as well. Divorce was inevitable, but I would ensure she couldn't hide from the destruction of her actions. She would have to answer to everyone she had deceived. It wasn't going to be easy. But I had already made up my mind. The plan was in motion, and I wouldn't stop until they both felt the full cost of their betrayal. The house felt like a hollow shell as I walked in. The familiar smell of coffee, the comforting hum of the kitchen, everything was exactly as it should be, and yet nothing was right. Rachel wasn't home yet. She had told me she would be working late, but I knew the truth now. I had seen the lies in her eyes, heard the secrets in her voice. The woman who stood before me now wasn't the woman I had trusted for 18 years. I went to the living room, pacing, waiting. The anger that had been building in me for days now simmered just beneath the surface, ready to explode. I tried to calm myself, to remind myself that this had to be done carefully. But the truth kept hammering at me, the truth that Rachel had destroyed everything. The door creaked open and I heard her voice. She was home. "Robert," she called, her voice tentative. "You're back early. What's going on?" I didn't respond at first. I just stood there, my back to her, trying to steady myself. I could hear the sound of her footsteps behind me, the rustle of her coat as she hung it up. She didn't know. Not yet. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice calm but edged with something darker. She paused. There was a long moment of silence before she spoke again, her tone a little lighter, as if she hadn't sensed the weight of what was coming. "About what? You've been gone for a while. I didn't think we needed to talk right now." I turned around slowly, facing her. She looked as beautiful as ever, her dark brown hair cascading over her shoulders, her warm brown eyes sparkling with an innocence she no longer deserved. For a moment, I almost faltered. I almost let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I had misunderstood, that I had misread the signs. But then I remembered everything, the kiss, the lies, the way she had chosen him over me. "No," I said, my voice firmer now. "We do need to talk." Rachel looked at me, confused, but the moment she saw the look in my eyes, her face fell. She seemed to recognize something was wrong. She took a step back, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together in front of her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice faltering. "What is this about, Robert?" I crossed my arms, taking a deep breath. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The time for hiding from the truth was over. "You're having an affair," I said, the words hanging in the air like a bullet fired from a gun. "With Victor Daniels." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. It was as though the truth had paralyzed her. I stood there, waiting for the inevitable, waiting for the denial, the excuses, the lies. I knew they were coming. They always did. But this time, they didn't. Instead, Rachel slowly lowered her eyes, the guilt creeping into her features. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. And then, finally, she spoke. "Robert," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted you to find out like this. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, a huge mistake." She stepped forward, reaching for me, her hands outstretched. "Please, you have to understand." I stepped back, shaking my head. "Understand?" The bitterness in my voice was unmistakable. "How could I possibly understand this, Rachel? How could I possibly understand what you've done? What you've done to me, to Ava, to everything we built?" Her face crumpled and she lowered her gaze. "I was lonely, Robert. I didn't know what to do. You were always gone. And then Victor, he was there. He listened to me. He cared. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did." "Did it?" I echoed, my voice shaking with fury. "How far did it go, Rachel? Was it just a kiss? Was it just a few stolen moments in the dark? Or was this a full-blown affair? How long, Rachel? How long have you been lying to me? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, her eyes welled up with tears, and she broke down, collapsing onto the couch, her sobs filling the room. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but She choked on her words. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't think I could tell you. I thought you'd hate me." "I don't hate you, Rachel," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "But I'm not sure I can love you anymore. Not after this. Not after everything you've taken from me, from us." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Rachel looked up at me, her tear-streaked face a mirror of the guilt and pain I felt. I wanted to feel sorry for her. I wanted to feel like I could forgive her, that we could move forward. But all I felt was betrayal. The love I had for her. Was it real, or had I just been blind? "Do you even love me anymore?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Or was this just about escaping from the life we had?" Rachel looked at me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could make it right." I turned away from her, the tears I had been holding back threatening to spill. You can't undo this, Rachel. What you've done is unforgivable." She cried harder, but I couldn't comfort her. Not now, not after everything. I left the room, my heart heavy with the realization that everything had changed. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. And now there was only the aftermath, the cold truth of betrayal. The following morning I could barely function. The confrontation with Rachel still felt raw, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me with every passing second. But as much as the emotional turmoil gnawed at me, I knew I couldn't stop now. The truth had to come out, not just for me, but for Ava, for the people who trusted Rachel, who thought she was the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I couldn't let this be swept under the rug. The phone call to my contact at the newspaper had been made. The story was about to break, but I needed to see it through. I wasn't just going to hand over the evidence and let it be published. I needed to be the one to expose Rachel and Victor, to show the world what they had done to me, to our family. I walked into the living room where Rachel was sitting, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She hadn't said much after our argument, but her silence was more painful than anything she could have said. I could feel her eyes follow me as I paced back and forth, the air between us thick with the unsaid words hanging in the room. I stopped in front of her, my gaze hard. "It's done," I said, my voice a low rasp. Rachel flinched, her body stiffening. "What do you mean?" "I've contacted the press," I said, the words coming out colder than I had intended. "The story is going public today. Everyone will know what you've done. Everyone will know about your affair with Victor." Her face paled even further, and she stood up, her hands trembling as she reached for me, as if she could somehow undo the damage. "Robert, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "You don't have to do this. I'll fix it. We can work through this. Please, don't ruin me. Don't ruin us." I took a step back, the disgust swirling in my chest. "You ruined us, Rachel. Don't you see that? It's already ruined. You had your chance to fix this. You chose him. Now everyone else will know the truth." Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I didn't feel the slightest flicker of sympathy. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, was gone. In her place was someone desperate to save herself, to salvage whatever was left of her life. But I couldn't save her. Not anymore. I walked out of the room, my mind clouded with a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. As I left the house to make my final call to the newspaper, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had become someone I didn't recognize. Revenge had a way of changing you, and I wasn't sure if I could come back from this. But it was too late now. I dialed my contact, my hands steady despite the chaos inside. "Robert," he said on the other end, his voice low. "The story is going to print this afternoon. It's all lined up. The photos, the statements, everything. It's going public. Are you sure about this?" "Yes," I said, my voice clear now, unyielding. "Make sure it gets out there. I want everyone to know. I want Victor to lose everything. I want Rachel to see what happens when you throw away your family for a man who doesn't care." "All right," he said, the line clicking as he hung up. I stood there for a moment, the finality of it settling over me. This was it. The damage was done. I had made my choice, and there was no going back. As I drove back home, I thought about Ava. She had no idea what was coming. She had begged me to keep the truth from her, to shelter her from the pain. But there was no way to protect her from this. The lie had gone on long enough, and now the whole world would know what had been going on behind closed doors. Rachel would be humiliated, and Victor would be ruined. But I wasn't sure what that would leave me with. What did revenge really accomplish in the end? The satisfaction of seeing them pay for what they did? Maybe. But something told me that even after the story broke, I wouldn't feel the peace I thought I would. I pulled into the driveway, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The door opened and Ava stood there, her expression guarded, waiting for me. "Dad?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and confusion. I stepped out of the car, avoiding her gaze. "It's done, Ava," I said, my voice flat. "The truth is out there now." She stepped forward, her eyes searching mine. "What do you mean? What truth?" I looked at her, feeling the cold emptiness seep into my bones. "It's over, sweetheart. I couldn't protect you from it anymore." Ava's face fell as she realized what I had done. The sadness in her eyes mirrored my own. "Did you really have to do this, Dad?" I couldn't answer. What was there left to say? The storm had come, and nothing could stop it now. The truth was out, and with it, everything I had ever known was gone. The days following the exposure of Rachel and Victor were a blur. The articles, the online comments, the whispers, it all felt like a storm I had unleashed but couldn't control. The relief I thought I'd feel was nowhere to be found. Instead, I was left with an overwhelming sense of emptiness. What had I really gained from all of this? I spent the next few days in a fog, barely able to focus on anything except the wreckage I had caused. Rachel had packed her things and left. She hadn't even looked back when she walked out the door. I had no idea where she went, and in some ways I didn't care. The image of her with Victor haunted me, but so did the nagging realization that I was still tied to this mess in ways I couldn't escape. Ava didn't speak to me much. She had retreated into herself, her eyes avoiding mine as if she couldn't quite bring herself to process everything that had happened. The betrayal, the chaos. She had seen it all unfold, and now she was the one left picking up the pieces. I sat at the kitchen table one afternoon, staring at the empty chair across from me. Ava had been quiet all morning. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, and it was suffocating. "You okay, Dad?" Ava's voice was small, hesitant. I turned to face her, the heaviness in my chest threatening to crush me. "I'm getting there," I said, but I didn't believe it. "How about you?" She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. "I don't know, it's just a lot." "I know," I said, my voice thick. "It's a lot for me, too." There was a long pause. Then finally she looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you regret it? Exposing them, I mean?" I felt a surge of emotion that nearly choked me. Regret? Did I regret it? A part of me wanted to say yes, wanted to say that the guilt of what I had done was too much to bear. But I couldn't lie to her, not now. "I don't know if regret is the right word," I said, my voice heavy. "I had to do it. But that doesn't make it easier. I wanted them to pay for what they did. But now that it's done, I'm not sure it changed anything. I'm still here. You're still here." She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. "Do you think it was worth it?" "I don't know," I said, the words slipping out more honestly than I intended. "I really don't." Ava looked at me, her expression softening. "I don't think it's about what's worth it anymore, Dad. It's about what comes next." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right, of course. What was done, and there was no way to take it back. The only thing I had left was to figure out what I was going to do with what came after. Rachel was gone. Victor's reputation was in shambles, but I had no satisfaction from that. He would pick up the pieces just as Rachel would. They would move on, while I was left to pick up my own pieces. Was revenge really worth it? Was it worth the loss of everything that had once mattered? I stood up, pushing the chair back from the table. Ava's eyes followed me as I walked to the window. The world outside seemed so unchanged, so indifferent to the chaos inside my home. I thought of all the times I'd come home from Afghanistan, the joy of seeing Rachel waiting for me, the simple happiness of a family reunited. And now, I couldn't undo the damage. The betrayal was too deep. But could I heal? Could we heal? "I'm sorry, Ava," I said, turning to face her. "I never wanted this for us. I never wanted you to see any of this. I didn't know what else to do." Ava looked at me, her face softening, but the sadness in her eyes remained. "I know, Dad," she said quietly. "I know you didn't, but we'll figure it out. Together." I nodded, the words feeling hollow, but they were the truth. We would figure it out. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be days of silence, days of pain, days when the memories would come rushing back, raw and fresh. But there was also something else, something buried under the hurt. There was a chance for healing, a chance to rebuild. I walked over to Ava and sat down next to her. For the first time in days, I let my guard down, allowing myself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. It was okay to hurt. It was okay to grieve. But it was also okay to move forward, to find some sense of peace in the aftermath. "We'll be all right, sweetheart," I said, reaching for her hand. "We'll make it through this." Ava squeezed my hand, her grip strong despite everything that had happened. "Yeah, we will," she said softly. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. What do you think of Robert's journey and his decision for revenge? From which region are you watching this video? Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. Don't forget to check out more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.